Policies that help reduce the cost of capital through lower interest rates, tax incentives, accelerated depreciation. As with other industry sectors, the most efficient technology tends to be the newest technology. So anything you can do to bring that new technology into use quickly will help deliver mitigation. Fifth, the many benefits of combined heat and power production are well known throughout the forest products industry, but there are regulatory barriers that discourage CHP. So they need to be addressed. 6, forest-based carbon sequestration should be carefully considered to avoid unintended consequences, such as the limitation of virgin fibre available for processing. It's important that the industry is allowed to live and to play its role in helping to solve the climate change problem. Number 7, the carbon removed from the atmosphere and sequestrated in forest products throughout their useful lives should be more fully recognised, as should the carbon and energy attributes of forest products, which really repeats the point I made earlier about use wood to make products first and then, when necessary, use it for energy. 8, public policies should encourage sustainable and highly efficient practices for producing and using all types of biomass. So the more efficient you can make the wood production, the less land it will use for any given amount of demand, and allow other land uses more scope to develop. 9, policies that reduce deforestation in developing countries and encourage active reforestation are needed to bring more of the world's forests under sustainable management. Sadly, many of the world's forests, as been noted, aren't under sustainable management, and there are a number of reasons for that, but certainly local management capacity, especially in developing countries, could be enhanced through development aid to make that management more of a reality. And lastly, public policy should allow market forces to determine the highest and best use of biomass fibre. So the point that's been made repeatedly is that unless you've got a carbon price and you can make it relevant to forest preservation, then it's difficult to move forward, and certainly difficult to move forward effectively. So having made those points about forest products, I'd like to make a few points now about carbon capture and storage, the geological storage of carbon. It is a reality that many countries in the world depend on coal and will continue to depend on coal for very many decades. There aren't any reputable forecasts for energy production, supply, that don't see an increasing use of coal. So the question is then, if coal is going to be used, how can it be used in a climate stabilizing fashion? And really, carbon capture and storage is the only big long-term option available to the industry that's going to make a difference. And indeed, early action is needed on carbon capture and storage if we're going to avoid what's called carbon lock-in, that's been referred to previously by Ivo de Boer. And carbon markets will not in themselves be enough to bring that early action. So moving on to the two overarching policy recommendations. The first is that we need a regulatory framework for this activity. It doesn't exist in a complete form anywhere in the world to date, although progress has been made. And until it does exist, or some assurance of its existence is given, then private companies are unlikely to be enthusiastic about committing large sums of money to the technology. What does the framework require? Well, it requires a number of things. First and foremost, of course, it requires incentives. Nobody invests in carbon capture and storage unless there is a carbon incentive for doing so. Unlike other abatement options, that energy efficiency, for instance, that can be justified in the energy savings they make, the only justification for CCS is the fact that you're taking carbon and storing it. A second area of the framework that needs development is legal clarity. Preston referred to potential claims on the geological, the resources in the geological formations that could be used for storage. Other potential users are interested in those resources, and the question of who has priority and how those claims can be adjudicated needs to be resolved, preferably through some sort of legislative framework. Safety, health and environmental regulation, of course, needs to be in place for each stage of the process, the capture, the transport and the storage of the CO2. And currently there's some conflict with existing regulations there, for instance in Europe with the Water Framework Directive, that needs to be resolved before we can make progress. Site selection and monitoring and reporting protocols need to be in place so that private operators have confidence that the way that they go about selecting the site and giving assurance that the CO2 remains where it should be need to be in place. And lastly, under the regulatory framework, but most importantly, there needs to be an assumption of the long-term liabilities that the carbon represents. It's a common characteristic of both biological and geological storage that the CO2 continues to exist in the world, albeit in a form that's climate neutral, but assurance has to be given that it will stay in that form. And certainly in the case of geological storage, with lifetimes we hope of 1,000 years plus, it's well beyond the expected lifetime of even the longest lived corporation. So the question arises, how can that assurance be given? The second overarching policy recommendation is the need for demonstration projects. Only through these demonstration projects will we develop the regulations we need, the regulatory certainty, but as important, it's only through working on the projects that we will understand how the technologies combine, because they already exist, we know that, but we haven't got experience at working with these technologies at scale and in the field and in the combinations that will be required. That experience needs to be gained, and it can only be gained through demonstration projects. Likewise, cost reduction. There are good prospects for cost reduction, but we need to see a pathway there that demonstration projects can give. Infrastructure development, notice has already been given that the infrastructure could be the scale of the currently existing natural gas industry. We need to think how that can be done, and demonstration projects can actually start that process of putting the pipelines in place. Last but not least, I believe only through demonstration projects that are shown to work and work well will we get the public acceptance that we need for this technology. We have to admit that at the moment the public are ignorant of the technology, but some of them are fearful of the consequences of poor management or unforeseen circumstances and what it could mean for them, their families, their communities and the environment. That trust needs to be earned, and demonstration projects again are essential there. So we call upon the governments of the world to generate the political will to put these demonstration projects in place and work with industry on them. Thank you.